I'm looking for answers, and I'm gonna find them.
Tell me when's Halloween, you shapeless piece of shit!
Did you know that the unspecialised body experiences all pain as a collapsing sphere? It's just something I thought was interesting, since it means that your body and like your nerves and whatever, they're all relativistic. It's like, oh, I've got a pain in my hand, I've got a pain in my leg. It doesn't mean anything really in the sense of your body objectively existing. And if you didn't have any of that, you'd still have all the sensations you used to have, you just wouldn't have any direction for them. And I think that's important mainly because the second I get an opportunity, I'm going to pull you apart like a bug. I'm going to take your limbs, take one arm in each hand, I'm just going to pull them off like you're a little cricket. That's what I'm going to do.
I'm not fucking scared of you!
You DCG'd my gun!
Many decks have come and gone that ended up being labeled as broken by the community, but very few of them can brag about having directly influenced the way Konami designed future cards. Infernity is one of said decks. In their 5D anime iteration, they were used by this guy, who is kinda like the fucking Joker, baby! And their designs are moderately confusing, as even though they range from the anime's Wild West shtick to the manga's robotic chess pieces, there's nothing particularly infernal about them besides their playstyle. Even though the Archetype has a reputation for its insane playmakers, it's pretty interesting how its original showing was powerful enough to make Infernity decks to this day still keep running those same playmakers from more than a decade ago. So how does a deck that focuses on emptying its own hand end up winning a world championship? Well, look no further than Infernity's first and most important card, Infernity Archfiend. It's a level 4 Dark Fiend with 1800 attack and 1200 defense and the following effect. When you draw this card, if you have no other cards in your hand, you can reveal this card, special summon it from your hand. When this card is special summoned, you can add one Infernity card from your deck to your hand. You must have no cards in your hand to activate and to resolve this effect. Archfiend? More like the patron saint of top decks. The most important part of this monster's effect is not what's written on it, but what's not written on it. See, back in the day, we didn't have all these silly hard once per turn effects, and around the end of the Synchro era, we started realizing we took it for granted. Archfiend can infinitely reuse his effect upon every special summon, which is what led to Infernity becoming one of the first obnoxious board setup decks in the game. The empty hand requirement is something the deck is built around, so it might as well not be there, but folks that are really in a pinch can always resort to the certified Infernity trick of setting up monster in the background and hoping the opponent doesn't ask any questions. Turns out Infinity's got a 5-year head start on artifacts. So yeah, every time your searcher works only once per turn or locks you into its own archetype until the end phase, you can blame this guy. Run the one copy you currently can in the TCG. Now, we're not exactly doing this in a chronological order, but we will be separating the old from the new support, so let's start ascending through the levels as usual. Infernity Mirage is a level 1 with 0 attack and defense, cannot be special summoned from the graveyard, and if you have no cards in your hand, you contribute it to special summon 2 Infernity monsters from the graveyard. The horrifying absence of once per turn limitations continues, although they were kind enough to restrict summoning Mirage from the graveyard because I assume somebody had a panic attack while imagining the combos. Once again, infinitely reusable as long as you're able to keep summoning it, limited just by the fact that there are only 6 monster zones on your field. Can you even call it a Mirage if it keeps reappearing? Infernity Avenger is a level 1 tuner with 0 attack and defense, and when a monster you control except Infernity Avenger is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard while you have no cards in your hand, you can special summon this card from your graveyard. In that case, the level of this card is equal to the level of the destroyed monster. Well, with those stats, this Avenger is not taking on Thanos anytime soon, but he can help out in other ways. This is your only level 1 tuner, and that's why you run it. The summon and level modulation ability actually used to be pretty fine, but the condition is still tricky to rely on today. Still, this guy will be spending most of his time in the graveyard, so there is a non-0% chance you might get some use out of the effect. It's another fine one-off. Infernity Randomizer is their last level 1 for now. It has 900 attack and 0 defense, is a warrior type for some reason. Then again, this honestly doesn't look like anything to me. And once per turn, while you have no cards in your hand, you can draw one card and reveal it. If it's a monster, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the level of that monster times 200. If it's a spell or trap card, you take 500 damage. Well, the artwork and the effect might seem freaking ridiculous, but it actually did used to be played in stun variants for draw power and easy conditions, since you'd basically be setting back row all the time. Somehow this one is a once per turn, but only a soft one, so you can actually stack 3 randomizers if you're lucky enough. The burn damage is not too big of a deal, really. If you think about it, it's just 2 halves of 1 abaki. It's hardly a viable card nowadays, but it does have a short history of usage. Now we're delving into the other side of the spectrum of poorly thought out Infernities, those being the ones that just suck ass. The first one being Infernity Dwarf. It's a level 2 warrior with 800 attack and 500 defense, and while you have no cards in your hand, it gives all your monsters piercing damage. Oh, this one's really good against Steel Storms, just remember to run Quaker Mirror Oats first. Infernity Beetle is a level 2 tuner insect with 1200 attack and 0 defense, and while you have no cards in your hand, you can tribute this card to special summon up to 2 Infernity Beetles from your deck. This was good when you only needed 2 Trishullas to win the game, as opposed to 3 with a set of Omni Negates behind them. Still, it's pretty cool if you're one of those people that gets hard over double tuning. Call that jacking off, if you will. Infernity Necromancer is their first level 3. It's got 0 attack and 2000 defense, and when this card is normal summoned, it is changed to defense position. If you have no cards in your hand, this card gains the following effect. Once per turn, you can select 1 Infernity monster in your graveyard except Infernity Necromancer and special summon it. This is Archfiend's partner in crime. It's a built-in Wolfbark effect for basically no cost, and once again, it's not a hard once per turn. At this point, it's just getting comical. Alongside Mirage and Archfiend, this is your main loop enabler, completing the freaky trio that lets you projectile vomit your entire extra deck onto the board until there's no space left. The worst or best thing, depending on your liking of the deck, is that this is not even the end of the Infernity combo machine, which will later extend way into the spell and trap lineup. Infernity Knight is a level 3 with 1400 attack and 400 defense, and when this card on the field is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can discard 2 cards to special summon it from the graveyard. The manga iteration of Infernities marks the first chess-based visual teaming of an archetype since Chess Archfiends, and this time they unfortunately seem to have cared a lot less for the chess than for the Archfiends. You're not this desperate for a personal hand rip, and even if you were, there are better options both for that and for floating in the archetype. Don't play this. Infernity Beast is a level 3, guess what? That's right, it's Beast. He has 1600 attack and 1400 defense, and if this card attacks while you have no cards in your hand, your opponent cannot activate any spell or trap cards until after the damage step. Yeah, I always said what Ancient Gear Golem needed was 1400 less attack and require you to hold no cards. Well, it does get over a Scrap Iron Scarecrow, but as most people aren't anime characters dueling exclusively against Yusei Fudo, there's not much here to care about. Infernity Guardian is a level 4 fiend with 1200 attack and 1700 defense, and while you have no cards in your hand, this face-up card cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. It would have actually been cool if it covered your whole field, but it hogs all the attention to its stupid face, so there's no point in running this one either. It was moderately annoying back in like 2010, but he's let himself go and all that. Went through a divorce, got a beer belly, the kids don't visit anymore, the car insurance ran out. Who guards Infernity Guardian? Infernity Archer is a level 6 with 2000 attack and 1000 defense, and while you have no cards in your hand, this card can attack your opponent directly. Using up tribute material and emptying your hands solely so you can deal 2000 direct battle damage may be a power move, but so is the OTK that will wipe your field the next turn after you've wasted all your setup on this thing. Moving along. Infernity Destroyer is another level 6 with 2300 attack and 1000 defense, and when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, inflict 1600 damage to your opponent. You must have no cards in your hand to activate and to resolve this effect. If you're wondering about the weirdly specific amount of burn damage this card deals, it's simply a result of Konami realizing the original anime effect of 800 damage would make the card even more forgettable than it is, to the point where it was also buffed for its second appearance in the show. It's good that some old Infinities hit the gym every now and then, but this one roided itself up with a few unnecessary levels, which didn't fare too well for its overall performance. The last main deck monster in the original lineup is Infernity General. It's a level 7 with 2700 attack and 1500 defense, and if you have no cards in your hand, you can banish this card from your graveyard to target 2 level 3 or lower Infernity monsters in your graveyard, special summon them from the graveyard, but their effects are negated. It's fine, I guess. It was a solid choice in synchro-focused Infernity for easy access to higher level synchros, and it's got a handy effect for extending your plays. The thing is, it's often a bit too much of a brick, and there are easier ways to get 2 monsters on board in this deck, without their effects being negated, so it's not much of an option nowadays. It's nice of them to not give it some embarrassingly useless battle effect, but there's still not much to work with here. For a quick side note, because I think it bears mentioning, it is a little weird that they adamantly refuse to print Death's Gunman, despite it being featured in so many video games, including Duel Links, but I guess they're just afraid of that obviously extremely consistent 0-turn kill strategy. Their first synchro monster is Infernity Doom Dragon. It's a level 8 dragon with 3000 attack and 2400 defense, requires 1 Dark Tuner and 1 or more non-tuner monsters, and once per turn, if you have no cards in your hand, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls, destroy that monster, and inflict damage to your opponent equal to half its attack. This card cannot attack the turn you activate this effect. It's the blandest targeted pop effect in the world for the same summoning effort you could put in to make about a dozen better synchros. Also, no. I don't know why it looks like that. I understand this game draws design inspiration from a lot of obscure sources, but somewhere between Fiendish Wild West and a googly-eyed crab-hand demon deer dragon with an exposed brain, there's a stunning gap of information! Void Ogre Dragon is not an Infernity by name, but it is by everything else, so we're putting it here. It's another level 8 with the same summoning condition. It's got 3000 attack and defense, and once per turn, when your opponent activates a spell or trap card while you have no cards in your hand, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. This was one of the main boss monsters monsters of the deck back in the day, as well as a popular Tzolk'in target, even though it's mostly replaced by Savage Borreload nowadays. It's still a pretty strong card though, so it just comes down to your preference. Another non-archetypal inclusion, which is worth mentioning more than their actual boss monster, is 100 Eyes Dragon. It's a level 8 with 3000 attack and 2500 defense, requires 1 Dark Tuner and 1 or more non-tuner Fiend monsters, and once per turn, you can banish 1 level 6 or lower Dark Effect monster from your graveyard. Until the end phase, this card's name becomes the banished monsters, and replace this effect with that banished monster's original effects. If this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, add 1 Earthbound Immortal monster from your deck to your hand. Okay, I won't be doing that, thank you. Believe it or not, this thing is actually pretty integral to your game plan, as it lets you banish Mirage to copy its effect and continue with even more loops. It's generally used as a play extender regardless of its high stats, which is not something you see often. A pretty funny piece of trivia about this card though is that its first errata had to hack away the hyphen out of its name so that it's not a Red Eyes monster. The Earthbound Immortal search effect was probably just too much potential. Run a couple of these, just not in Earthbounds please. In fact, I have an entire video about why you shouldn't play Earthbounds. Now for the back row, immediately starting off pretty weird with Zero Max. It's a normal spell that says activate only if you have no cards in your hand. Select 1 Infernity monster in your graveyard, special summon it and destroy all face-up monsters on the field with attack lower than the special summon monster's attack. You cannot conduct your battle phase the turn you activate this card. Ignoring the novelty of a name that sounds like a brand of laundry detergent, Zero Max is a pretty variable choice to run. It is Revival, which lets you extend your Necromancer combos further, and even removal in some rare occasions, but it's understandable if you'd rather stick with the Archetype's other extenders, cause god knows he's got a lot of those. Wave Motion Inferno is a continuous spell that says, while you have no cards in your hand, face-up Infernity monsters you control gain 400 attack and defense. You can send this face-up card from the field to the graveyard to send all cards from your hand to the graveyard. You really don't need this to pitch your hand away, and those 400 attack are not gonna make Infernity Dwarf any better. It's also completely unsearchable by the deck, so there is literally no point in running it. The reason why we're actually here is the next card. Infernity Launcher is their other continuous spell with the following effect. Once per turn, you can send 1 Infernity monster from your hand to the graveyard. You can send this card to the graveyard, then target up to 2 Infernity monsters in your graveyard, special summon them. You must have no cards in your hand to activate and resolve this effect. This card is called Infernity Gun in the OCG because it's the Yu-Gi-Oh equivalent of pulling a revolver out your pocket and shooting the opponent in the face. It sets up the graveyard, it gives you a double reborn, it's not once per turn, and it's fully searchable. It doesn't explicitly say put 3 negates on the board for free, but it might as well because that's basically what it does. This is the quintessential Infernity card, and the chaos resulting from just using 1 is the reason why it's limited to this day. So yes, of course you run it. It's like explaining why 6 Sams need to run Gateway, it just does everything. There's also Into the Void, which we'll get into later for reasons. The first trap is Infernity Inferno.
Say that again.
It's a normal trap that lets you discard up to 2 cards and send the same number of Infernity cards from your deck to the graveyard. This was almost neat way back in the day as an unconventional way to set up your stuff. It was okay but nothing amazing, and to call it questionable today would be an understatement. Next up is Infernity Force. Activate only when an Infernity monster is selected as an attack target while you have no cards in your hand. Destroy the attacking monster and special summon 1 Infernity monster from your graveyard. We didn't need a worse Sakuretsu armor even with the Revive constellation. It's a masterpiece for the playground variety, which means you don't play it in anything relevant. Infernity Reflector is a trap you activate only by discarding all the cards in your hand when an Infernity monster you control is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard. Special summon that monster from your graveyard and inflict 1000 damage to your opponent. It's just a different flavor of Force and a glorified time machine. If you run this, the only thing you should reflect on is yourself. Infernity Break is their last normal trap for now, and it says if you have no cards in your hand, target 1 Infernity card in your graveyard and 1 card your opponent controls, banish the first target, and if you do, destroy the second target. As searchable quick spot removal, it's essentially an archetypal zero-cost Regeki break. Sometimes Omni Negates don't cover everything you need, so running 1 break is perfectly fine. And speaking of Omni Negates, here's Infernity Barrier. It's a counter trap with the following effect. When your opponent activates a spell or trap card or monster effect while you control a face-up attack position Infernity monster and have no cards in your hand, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. Barrier took a quirky little spammy synchro deck and turned it into a multi-negate setup board break challenge clusterfuck that set a precedent for the game that lasts to this day. The fact that you could casually run 3 of these in fucking 2010 is like running somebody over with your car and then backing them over just to make sure you finish the job. Twice. I don't know what the TCG was on with their exclusives back in that time, but if their new archetypes are anything to go by, they've been filling feeling very sorry for it ever since. Well, run 3, cause you know how they say, the more the barrier! It broke the game. Quick mention to Phantom Hand, a continuous trap that says, once per turn if you control a face-up Infernity monster, you can banish all cards in your hand face down until your next standby phase. This is not gonna top any events, but without knowing the context of the archetype it comes from, this is probably one of the funniest effects in the game. Right after Scrap Kong, of course.
I'm dead!
In the 8-year limbo between the old and new Infinities, we got a single monster worth of support in the form of Infernity Patriarch.
Yeah, Daddy!
It's a level 4 with 1000 attack and 2000 defense, and if this is the only card in your hand, you can special summon it. You can only special summon Infernity Patriarch once per turn this way. While you have no cards in your hand, if an Infernity monster you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. Welcoming Infinities to the concept of hard once per turn effects, which they are partially responsible for, Patriarch is decent as a body on the field, combined with combo extension and some decent protection in the graveyard. It's a fine one-off, mostly because you'd rather search him when you need to instead of drawing into him. For the actual new line of support from 2020, we start off with Infernity Pawn. It's a level 1 with 0 attack and defense, and during your draw phase, if you have no cards in your hand, instead of conducting your normal draw, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then either place one Infernity card from your deck on top of your deck, or set one Void spell or trap card directly from your deck. God, this is where the visual design of Chess Infinity is fully leaned into the Vision Hero reject style. It doesn't help that the sheer slowness of this effect means the card is not worth running even though it's able to set up Archfiend. But let's talk about this Void archetype for a second. See, the manga Infinities were supported by a lineup of back row consisting of so-called Void cards, as well as a monster in the form of Void Ogre Dragon. Initially, none of these cards actually got printed, but we did get the thematically consistent Into the Void, which if you have 3 or more cards in your hand lets you draw a card, but discard your entire hand at the end of the turn, which is good but not really necessary in this deck. However, with the new support, the Void archetype of spells and traps got reintroduced to Infernity, making for a pretty fucking confusing crossover with another archetype that uses Void back row, those being Infernoids. The connection between the concepts of Inferno and Void might seem vague and confusing, but it makes marginally more sense when you realize that Void is just the TCG localization for the word Purgatory. The thing is, Infernoids do have a Void card that's really good for Infinities because it just lets you discard a card to dump a fiend from your deck to the graveyard, which was released the same year as the new Infernity support. I don't know what I'm conspiring about here, like, I'm not trying to expose Big Fiend or something, but it's just kind of fucking weird. Showcase of accidental deck inbreeding aside, Pawn is completely disposable. For something less confusing, Infernity Sage is a level 2 tuner with 400 attack and 800 defense, and during your main phase, you can discard your entire hand. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can send one Infernity monster from your deck to the graveyard. You must have no cards in your hand to activate and resolve this effect. You can only use each effect of Infernity Sage once per turn. Oh, I can discard my entire fucking hand for no effect only once per turn? Thanks for letting me know. It's okay-ish only because it's a tuner with a dump effect, but it doesn't really do anything Armageddon Knight wasn't already doing, and level 2 is not the best level for a tuner in this deck. Also, you wouldn't be this desperate to wipe your hand even if you just got done giving a wank to Plague Splitter Zombie. Infernity Conjurer is a level 3 with 1200 attack and 900 defense, and while you have no cards in your hand, monsters your opponent controls lose 800 attack. While you have no cards in your hand and this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. You can only use this effect of Infernity Conjurer once per turn. It's one of the moderately better cards in the new support. The attack reduction is pointless, but it has a good level, a nice reborn condition, makes good material for Levier, which is pretty important, so one is fine if you really have to. It's the definition of serviceable. Their last main deck monster is Infernity Wildcat.
Hello, Wildcat.
It's a level 3 with 1400 attack and 0 defense, and you can special summon this card from your hand by sending one other Infernity monster in your hand to the graveyard. You can only special summon Infernity Wildcat once per turn this way. While you have no cards in your hand, you can banish one Infernity monster from your graveyard, increase or decrease the level of this card by 1 until the end of this turn. You can only use this effect of Infernity Wildcat once per turn. Jeez, talk about karma. Infinities went from having no hard once per turn effects on any of their monsters to having it twice on one of them. Wildcat is, once again, okay. It summons itself, dumps a card such as Conjurer, it's a tuner with level modulation so it gives some variety to your Exo deck and lets you get to the level 8s faster. Yet again, one copy is okay because with new Infinities it's really about finding the right flavor of brick you want to draw into. The only Exo deck monster in this lineup is Infernity Doom Archfiend. It's a generic level 6 synchro with 2200 attack and 1600 defense, and once per turn, you can target Activate one face-up card on the field, negate its effects until the end of this turn, then if you have no cards in your hand, you can destroy it. While you have no cards in your hand, if this card battles an opponent's monster, any battle damage this card inflicts to your opponent is doubled. A Dark Synchro monster that was summoned using this card as material can make up to 2 attacks on monsters during each battle phase. It's really weird to see an archetypal boss monster with negation and destruction and it not being a quick effect, but I guess that's the trade-away they had to make because it's generic for some reason. The battle damage boosting is completely meaningless, and giving double attacking to a synchro you stack this into is at most kind of cute. See, with Infernity support, the first thing you have to ask is, ooh, does this one let me summon Archfiend 30 times per turn? And when it doesn't, the card immediately becomes a questionable choice to run. Despite his name, Doom Archfiend is hardly an improvement over the OG, but playing one is fine if you have room in the extra deck. Contract with the Void is a normal spell that says, if you have at least 3 other cards in your hand, discard your entire hand, then you can special summon one Infernity monster or one level 8 Dark Dragon Synchro monster from your graveyard. Activate this, opponent reveals Ghost Bell, go to game 2. Fun stuff. Infernity has this whole thing about edging close to death for their effects, which is a fun gimmick, but a lot of these cards don't make good use of it. It's searchable by pawn, but at that point you can't even activate it, which is kind of tragically hilarious in a way. Infernity Paranoia is a spell that lets you tribute one dark monster to special summon one Infernity monster from your deck or graveyard with the same level but a different name, but negate its effects. During your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one Infernity monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand. You can only activate one Infernity Paranoia per turn. This one's completely up to preference. It's searchable and provides some resources along with a bit of recovery, so it gives the deck options, but it's not necessary if you don't think it meshes with your playstyle. If it does, then you run it as the ever so present one-off. Infernity Suppression is a normal trap that says if you have no cards in your hand, you can activate this card the turn it was set. When your opponent activates a monster effect while you control an Infernity monster, negate the effect, then you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's level times 100. You can only activate one Infernity Suppression per turn. This mostly exists because Infinities don't really have an answer to hand traps since they can't reliably run Cold by the Grave or Crossout Designator. Still, in the middle of your Archfiend flickering between the field and graveyard like a cesium atom on crack, the opponent can snipe your field with whatever they feel like, so it doesn't quite work whenever it's necessary. I feel like by the time you wanna search this one, you already got hit by Ash Blossom. The last Infernity card is Void Cauldron. If an Infernity monster and or a level 8 Dark Dragon Synchro monster you control will be destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can banish one Infernity card from your graveyard instead. If you have any cards in your hand, send this card to the graveyard. For this maintenance cost, I don't get why it doesn't just protect your whole field without that stupid banishing requirement. This only works if you have an infinite supply of pawns in your graveyard, which is an objectively inferior way to play the deck than just dropping a single barrier. If you wanna run pawn randomizer control or something, go for it, but there are less obnoxious ways to protect your field. Kicking off the grades, their consistency halfway depends on how many hand traps your opponent runs. Whatever you do, you're gonna have to empty your hand by the end of the turn, but the quality of your board may vary. Someone at the table is gonna lose and you won't know who it is until you have no more plays to make. It's a firm 3. Their power is around the same level. The actual archetypal output is nothing outstanding, but nothing bad either. They have some limited spot removal, and their few boss monsters reach the rare 3000 attack. The fields they're able to set up with a good hand can also occasionally result in OTK boards, so essentially this is another 3. Their recovery is a different story. Even though top decking Archfiend is the mother of all comebacks, the way the deck is designed is basically anti-recovery. You build your whole field on turn 1, and if the opponent burns through all negates, there's not much you can do. It would be a 1, but Archfiend gives it an honorary 2. As for the protection, well, I usually put all the Omni negation into versatility, so there's not much going on here either. There's Guardian, Force, Cauldron, and Patriarch, of which only the latter is remotely playable and you run it as a one-off. You don't rely on the protection to stay alive, it's mostly the negation, so this is pretty much a 1. Versatility, however, oh lord. Not only is this deck able to effortlessly juggle between Synchro, Xyz, and Link builds, allowing for immense levels of variety, but one of its main plays involves setting 3 Omni negates on turn 1, which basically means it's ready for anything and everything. It's pretty telling that despite all the Synchro focus, the build that ended up winning Worlds was a rank 4 variant. It doesn't always get going, but when it does, it's hard to stop it. Also, it's not something I'd call competitively viable, but they do have a combo involving Psyblocker, which takes several months to perform and disables every single card in the game. Just thought it would be funny to mention. Anything below a 5 here would be wrong. Here's a deck list which definitely requires some elaboration. Stygian Street Patrol, Fiendish Rhino Warrior, and Archfiend Ares are there to help out with field setup. Gillosaurus and Fossil Dig serve as level 3 material for Cherubini. Charge into a Dark World lets you discard Archfiend to bring back Necromancer, and the dangers are there because they look funny. At the end of the day, there's no reason to worry about Infernity ratios. They're like video essays about Dark Souls. There's 3000 of them and they're all wrong. What a weird freaking archetype. Somehow the trade-away for the most player-hostile gimmick in the game ended up being the most ludicrous bunch of effects ever seen at that point. Even without the excessive negation, they still have access to incredible amounts of field setup that lets them adapt to pretty much any summoning mechanic, which is really funny to say about a deck that instantly loses to spiritualism. Most people didn't expect an archetype this notorious to receive legacy support at all, but it's pretty funny how subdued that support ended up being, because one wrong move could probably make these things host a goddamn rave party at the banlist hall. Again.
Alright everyone, welcome to Spooked Spooky Chasers, the show where we go into haunted houses and investigate what is inside of the haunted houses. This has never been done before. Today we're looking at the infamous Doom House, where it is said that a man found an evil doll and died. So we're gonna go in, and I got my ghost remote here, and I'm just gonna flip this baby on. Okay. Okay, over here we have the barbecue of suspicious meat. How can you know if what you're eating is hot dog or your dad? It's hot dog. Alright, okay, I see a few of you are not shaking in terror here, so we're gonna move on. Are there any spirits here that want to talk? Okay, are there any spirits that don't want to talk? I mean, I'm used to that.
Wow, you're the most horrible thing in here somehow.
Hey, could you go away? I'm trying to contact the spirits here.
Oh, okay. Wait, I'm spirits.
Oh, well, okay, whatever. How did you die?
I was raised like a pig for slaughter, and when the day came, I was pulled apart on the altar and sacrificed to a screaming god. Like so many others before me, my bones were left beneath this mansion until our hate grew so thick that it rose through the floorboards. Those who had killed us in the name of their god met the same fate, and the mansion stank with their remains for weeks before they were found. Or I choked on a chicken nugget. I'm dead, so I don't remember if something is real or a scary movie I watched.
Oh, that's not... Okay, so what I heard about the Doom House is that a guy found an evil doll.
Oh, we're fresh out of evil dolls. I'm a real doggy. Also, this isn't the Doom House.
Oh. So what house is this?
This is the Archetype mass grave. There's a whole room just for pendulums down the hall.
Oh, that makes sense. Could I, like, have whatever's in your fridge? I'm not picky. I walked all this way. I'm really
No. People live in that fridge.
Okay.
You have to leave now.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
I'm leaving.
Hello.
Ah!
Why aren't you leaving?
Because I crapped myself.